Why was she the last one anyone noticed in the room? The briefing had already begun, the room buzzing with clipped orders and the low hum of a projector. Maps sprawled across the table like battle scars, each point blinking like a tiny warning. Men and women around her took notes, nodded, asked questions, but she sat there, silent, unnoticed. Her name wasn't on the roster. Her rank didn't exist in the official logs, yet she knew this mission would fail without her. She had to make them see it, before it was too late. Her eyes scanned the layout again, tracing the movement lines, the choke points, the exits. She had memorized every inch of the target compound the night before, alone in her apartment, the glow of the city bleeding through thin blinds. She remembered the first time she had felt this kind of pressure, a smaller operation 2 months ago where she had stayed behind to cover a teammate's extraction. The adrenaline, the fear, the steady pulse in her ears, it had become a rhythm she could almost trust. But this mission, this one felt heavier, different. The chatter in the room dimmed as Captain Morales finally looked up from the map. "We move at 0300, he said, voice sharp but not unkind. "Standard recon, infiltrate, secure intel, extract, keep comms tight." His eyes swept the room, landing on her momentarily. She caught it, a flicker of recognition, quickly gone. She swallowed, her throat dry. No one else would remember her in the logs if she died. That reality had a strange weight. Most would fight for medals. She fought to survive, for the people who couldn't. Her pack felt heavier than it had any right to, the straps digging into her shoulders. Every tool, every bit of gear meticulously checked and rechecked. A small flashlight, extra comm batteries, silenced pistol, combat knife tucked where only she knew. Each item carried a memory. Each choice a calculation. She had learned early on that preparation wasn't just for survival. It was a silent argument with fate, one she always intended to win. Outside, the night was soft, almost forgiving. The wind whispered through palm fronds, carrying scents of wet earth and dust. It was deceptive. She could hear the distant hum of traffic, the faint thrum of generators from the neighboring compounds. In another life, it might have been calming. Tonight, it was a reminder that the world continued, indifferent to her mission, indifferent to what would be lost if she failed. They moved in silence, boots whispering against gravel, shadows stretching across walls like dark fingers. She was last in the formation, letting others take the lead. It was a tactic she had refined over years: watch, analyze, cover. Her ears caught every tiny shift, a creak of wood, a scuff of stone, a breath caught too long. One wrong sound could unravel everything. One mistake and the team would pay with more than just the mission. She remembered her father then. Not the man who taught her to shoot, not the drill sergeant who demanded precision, but the quiet evenings when he told her stories of people who made choices that mattered, when no one was watching. "Sometimes," he had said, voice soft behind the hum of a television, "the only record that counts is the one you carry inside." She carried it now, heavier than any pack. The target compound rose ahead, angular and concrete, lights scattered like dying stars. She froze at the edge of the wall, breath shallow. Through night vision, shapes moved inside, guards packing, routine and predictable. She adjusted her comms, checking signals, whispering into the mic. 2 clicks north of the southwest corner, eyes on the perimeter. A pause, silence. Then a faint acknowledgement. They trusted her, though the logs wouldn't. That was enough. For now. Movement inside shifted. One guard paused, then resumed a slow turn, flashlight beam slicing the darkness. She tensed, feeling the beat of her heart in her throat. Every mission had a breaking point, a moment when hesitation could cost everything. She found hers in the sudden flare of doubt. What if she failed? What if her anonymity here meant no one would notice her absence until it was too late? The thought made her grip her weapon tighter. She had survived worse, and this was just another test. She scaled the wall with practiced ease, muscles burning, fingers numb. Landing on the other side, she felt the grit scrape her palms. It was a small pain, nothing compared to the weight in her chest. She moved like a shadow, weaving through the compound's perimeter. Every detail mattered. The angle of the cameras, the timing of the guards' rotations, the slightest breeze that might carry her scent. Her mind worked in tight loops, calculating, anticipating, preparing for contingencies no one else had thought to plan for. Inside, the rooms were silent, eerily so. Papers rustled in the ventilation, a stray fan hummed somewhere above. She slipped into the first office, scanning quickly. Files, computers, drawers, nothing out of place, but every instinct screamed caution. She paused, hand on the doorknob of the next room, a slight vibration beneath her boot, the hum of electricity, the scent of stale coffee, the presence of life just beyond her senses. She closed her eyes for a moment, centering herself. Fear didn't disappear. It became a tool, a sharpened edge. She found it, a terminal left unlocked, a faint blinking cursor. Fingers moved quickly, almost instinctively, downloading the intel that could turn the mission from uncertain to a success. Every click, every keystroke carried the weight of invisible lives depending on her. Outside, footsteps approached. She froze. They were close, closer than they should be. Her mind raced. She could have fled, could have signaled backup, but that wasn't her way. She had a plan, rehearsed 100 times in the dark of her apartment. Sliding into the shadows, she waited, breath shallow. The guard passed, unaware of the presence that had watched him like a ghost. She exhaled slowly, relief mixed with a surge of pride. Anonymity had its advantages. No one expected the unexpected. When she emerged, she found her team already at the extraction point. A faint nod from Captain Morales. That was all the acknowledgement she needed. She carried the data and with it the weight of the mission's survival. The ride back was silent, each of them lost in their own thoughts. She let her hands rest on her knees, chest heaving. There was no glory here, no medals, no records of her name. Only the quiet satisfaction of knowing she had kept the mission alive. Back at base, the debriefing was routine, clinical. Questions, observations, minor praise, and technical feedback. She answered without fanfare. Her name wasn't mentioned in the official logs. It didn't exist. And yet in her mind, the mission had been a success because she had refused to fall. She remembered her father's words again, and this time a small smile touched her lips. Some victories aren't written. Some records aren't filed. Some triumphs are carried quietly, in the silence of knowing you've done what no one else could. Night fell again. She sat alone, gear hung up, mind still racing. Outside, the city moved without pause, indifferent as ever. And she knew it. The world would never know her name. But sometimes she thought that was exactly the point. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. And in that quiet, unacknowledged heroism, she found a strange kind of peace. Why did the radio stay silent when she called? Every instinct screamed that something had gone wrong, though nothing looked out of place. The base was calm, too calm, the hum of fluorescent lights overhead a false comfort. She pressed the button again, a soft click, her voice low but urgent. "Command, do you copy?" Static answered her instead, buzzing in her ears like a warning. Her stomach tightened. Missions weren't supposed to feel like this. Routine, predictable, controllable, that's what they were trained to expect. Yet here she was, alone in the communications room, clutching the handset like a lifeline, aware that every second could change everything. The data she had retrieved, the intel that had made the operation a success, was now at risk. Not from enemies outside, but from a system that didn't recognize her existence. She was invisible, and sometimes invisibility was dangerous. She remembered the first time she had realized how invisible she could be. A deployment months ago, she had risked herself to cover a retreat, saved lives, came back bruised, bleeding, exhausted, and no one had mentioned her in the report. No medals, no commendations, just the quiet nod of a teammate and the hollow echo of recognition that never came. At the time, it had stung. Now she carried it like armor, because survival wasn't about applause. It was about being the one who didn't fall when others might. A soft tap on her shoulder made her jump. It was Lieutenant Harris, one of the few who had noticed her the night before. His eyes were sharp, concerned. "Everything okay?" he asked, voice low. The tension between them wasn't new, it had grown over months of overlapping missions. She gave a brief nod. "Static, radio's dead, trying backup." He leaned closer, studying her. "You did good out there, don't let anyone tell you otherwise." His words, though simple, cut through the anxiety in her chest. She nodded again, a small smile brushing her lips. Recognition, even private, was rare for her, but it mattered more than any medal ever could. Her fingers danced over the keyboard, rerouting signals, bypassing firewalls, improvising with a skill born of necessity. It wasn't training. They didn't teach this in manuals. It was instinct, honed over sleepless nights and missions where improvisation had been the difference between life and death. Each command she typed was precise, deliberate, a whisper against the mechanical heartbeat of the machines around her. Outside, the sky was shifting, streaked with the first hint of dawn. The world looked ordinary, unaware of the tension coiled inside this small, brightly lit room. She imagined the streets filling with commuters, the hum of the city masking danger and survival alike. She envied them for a second, the ease of their lives, until guilt pulled her back. She couldn't stop. Not now. Finally, the radio crackled. A voice, clipped, professional, barely above a whisper. "Copy status," she exhaled slowly. Relief washed over her, mingled with exhaustion. "Mission intel secured, extraction successful, all accounted for." She hesitated. "Except," the pause hung heavy, "except my identity in the logs." The voice on the other end chuckled faintly, though it wasn't mocking. "Noted, that's complicated. Good work out there." Complicated. She had become accustomed to that word. Complicated, invisible, unrecognized, but essential. Essential. That word grounded her, gave her purpose when nothing else would. Hours passed. She moved mechanically, checking systems, running diagnostics, securing files. She could feel her body shutting down, muscles stiffening, eyelids heavy. But her mind remained alert, circling around threats, contingencies, possibilities. Each sound made her flinch, the distant hum of generators, the click of a door down the hall, the soft thrum of the air conditioning. She was alive, yes, but alive in the sharp edge of vigilance, where peace was only temporary and danger never far. Her thoughts drifted, as they often did, to her mother, the woman who had stayed awake night after night, listening for the slightest noise, teaching her that preparation was survival, that courage was often silent. She remembered the scent of her kitchen, the warmth of her hands guiding hers over tasks too small to matter at the time. But now, each memory was a thread tying her to something larger than herself. She fought because someone had taught her to. She survived because someone had shown her how. Then came the knock, soft, measured. She turned, heart tightening, ready to react. A figure stood in the doorway, Sergeant Daniels. He was one of the few who knew her full skill set, though none of the brass had ever acknowledged it. "You okay?" he asked. His tone wasn't judgmental. There was worry there, and maybe something she didn't expect, respect. She nodded, though she wasn't sure if it was true. Just tired. The lie felt honest enough. She had been running on adrenaline and necessity for hours, perhaps days. Her body ached. Her mind buzzed with fragmented calculations. She wanted to collapse, but she couldn't, not yet. He stepped in, closing the door behind him. "Coffee?" he asked. The offer wasn't about caffeine. It was ritual, grounding, human. She allowed herself a small smile, the first real one in hours. "Yes," she said. Something simple, ordinary, but it reminded her that she was still alive, still human. They sat, coffee steaming between them, silence comfortable for once. Daniels spoke first, recounting a mission mishap months prior, small, inconsequential in the logs, but she listened anyway. His voice, animated and tinged with regret, filled the room with a warmth that hadn't existed before. It reminded her that people were messy, imperfect, full of fears and doubts. And yet, somehow, survival depended on connecting with them, trusting them, even when trust was hard-earned. When he left, she returned to the monitors. The mission was technically complete, yet a nagging unease remained. Something didn't sit right. She couldn't explain it, couldn't name it, but her instincts, a sense honed over countless missions, countless invisible triumphs, told her that the quiet was dangerous. The files she had secured were sensitive, capable of shifting the balance of operations. One misstep, one leak, one overlooked detail, and lives could be lost. She leaned back in her chair, listening to the faint creaks of the base settling, the hum of electricity, the distant echo of footsteps on concrete. The world was awake now, moving forward, indifferent as ever. And she remained in her corner, small, unnoticed, essential. She thought of the team in the field. Faces blurred in memory, voices caught in snippets of radio chatter, moments where she had watched them trust her decisions without hesitation. She had no claim to accolades, no record of her actions, but in that trust, fleeting though it was, she found something more enduring: purpose. It was quieter than glory, subtler than medals, yet infinitely more powerful. Hours turned into a rhythm of movement and stillness. Checks and rechecks, calculations, contingencies, every action deliberate, every pause measured. She realized she had become a ghost in the machinery of operations, and for the first time she accepted it not as a slight but as a strategy. Invisible, yes, but necessary. Vital. Unseen, yet holding the mission together like an unseen spine. And then came the unexpected, an alert on one terminal, sharp, insistent, unauthorized access attempt. Her pulse spiked. Someone was trying to breach the files she had secured. She moved instantly, fingers flying over keys, eyes scanning logs, heartbeat syncing with the alerts. Whoever it was, they wouldn't succeed. Not on her watch. Not ever. The breach persisted, relentless, probing, testing defenses she had only just reinforced. She leaned forward, whispering to herself, coaxing the system like a patient warrior coaxing a faltering ally. She felt the tension coil tighter in her chest, adrenaline mingling with fear, determination, and the faint, stubborn pride of someone who refused to fail, even when unrecognized. Finally, with a quiet click, the system locked out the intruder. Success. Relief washed over her, sharp and fleeting. She leaned back, hands trembling, mind racing. She had done it. Alone, invisible, unacknowledged, essential. The mission's success was safe for now. She closed her eyes, letting the exhaustion press against her like a heavy blanket. Outside, the dawn was spreading across the horizon. Light, indifferent, washing over the world. And she realized quietly that she had done more than survive. She had protected, preserved, and acted when it mattered most. Sometimes, she thought, the world doesn't notice heroes. Sometimes it barely notices survival, but the act itself, the refusal to fall, is enough. It is everything. And in that quiet realization she felt a strange, fierce pride, invisible, yes, but unbroken. Why did she hear that faint whisper of movement when every sensor said the hall was empty? The warning gnawed at the edge of her awareness. She paused mid-step, body tense, senses stretched taut. The mission was supposed to be winding down, the extraction point near. Yet something in the air told her danger was still alive, unseen, patient. Her boots made almost no sound as she advanced, eyes scanning every shadow, every flicker of light. Each hallway felt longer than it should, echoing with the rhythm of her own heartbeat. She had always been cautious, not because fear dominated her, but because she had learned the price of oversight. Too many times mistakes had been punished, others paid the cost, while she carried the memory like a weight in her chest. She remembered the first field deployment where she had nearly been caught in crossfire. A teammate had shouted her name, pulling her to cover. She had survived, but the image of him, tense and scared, had stayed with her. She hadn't spoken much after that mission. Words had felt unnecessary. Actions spoke louder. Survival spoke louder. And now, once again, her silence was a shield. The dim light of the compound revealed scattered debris, abandoned chairs, a toppled filing cabinet, paper fluttering in the faint breeze from an open vent. It was an eerie scene, almost serene in its disorder. Yet she knew better. Danger often wore the face of calm. Every instinct screamed that she wasn't alone. She crouched behind a support beam, gripping her sidearm. Her mind raced, thinking through possible threats. An enemy operative, a rogue security system, someone who had followed them back from the mission. The uncertainty pressed against her like a physical weight. Every second spent guessing was a second someone could die, and she refused to let that happen, not again. A soft click echoed from the far end of the hallway. She froze, adjusting her grip, controlling her breath. It was almost imperceptible, a subtle misalignment in the floorboards, but it was enough. Enough to know that someone was there. Someone moving with intent, not a stray guard, not an accidental wanderer. She leaned forward, listening, waiting. The fear that had always accompanied her most dangerous moments was present, sharp, but tempered by determination. She had learned to work with fear, to let it sharpen her senses instead of paralyzing her. That edge, calculated, honed, had saved her life more than once, and she would need it now. The figure emerged from the shadows, a man, face obscured by a hood. She could see the outline of a weapon. Her pulse quickened, training kicked in. Precision, not panic, she didn't fire immediately. She waited, letting him come closer, reading his movements. Every subtle twitch, every shift in weight told a story. He was confident but not reckless. Dangerous, yes, but flawed. A flash of recognition crossed her mind. This was no ordinary intruder. His movements were too deliberate, too skilled. Someone sent to test the mission, or perhaps to recover what they thought was theirs. She had only one choice: act without hesitation. Her fingers tightened around the grip. The click of her safety disengaging echoed softly in the hallway. She stepped from the shadows, voice low but commanding. "Stop! Identify yourself." The man froze, then slowly raised his hands. "I mean no harm," he said, voice steady, yet she didn't trust it. Trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. Not tonight, not when the stakes were this high. "Then explain why you're here," she demanded, eyes narrowing. "Now." A pause, the tension hung like smoke in the air. Finally, he spoke. "I was sent to retrieve data. I know you have it. I don't want to fight, but I can't leave without it." Her heart sank. The intel she had secured, the lifeline for the mission's success, was now in jeopardy. She felt the familiar knot of anxiety tighten in her stomach, and yet beneath it a spark of resolve. She wouldn't let it slip away, not on her watch, not when the lives of others depended on her vigilance. "Then you're leaving empty-handed," she said, voice cold but steady. Her eyes didn't waver. "That data doesn't belong to you. It never did." He studied her, perhaps sensing the depth of her conviction. Then, without warning, he lunged. The hallway became a blur of motion. Reflexes honed by years of unseen preparation took over. She sidestepped, twisting, feeling the scrape of concrete under her boots, her pulse screaming in her ears. She countered, a swift maneuver bringing him to the ground. The struggle was brief, brutal, but controlled. Every move measured, precise. She pinned him just long enough to retrieve a flash drive he had clutched. Breath ragged, adrenaline coursing, she held it like a trophy. A small victory, but one that mattered. In this game, even the tiniest edge could tilt the balance between survival and disaster. When he scrambled away, muttering curses under his breath, she didn't chase. Let him leave. Let him carry his pride and failure alike. Her mission wasn't about confrontation. It was about results, about protecting lives, about refusing to fall when it mattered most. Exiting the building, she felt the early morning light brushing against her face. It was sharp, almost blinding after the darkness of the compound. Birds stirred in the trees nearby, unaware of the violence and tension that had just played out beneath their watchful eyes. She paused, letting the warmth touch her skin, taking a deep breath. Relief, satisfaction, and yet an unshakable sense of vigilance lingered. Her mind returned to the team. They were waiting at the rendezvous point, trusting her to guide them safely, to navigate dangers she could see but they couldn't. She would not disappoint them. She never had. And though her name remained unrecorded, though her presence in the official logs would be absent, she knew her actions spoke louder than words. As she approached the extraction zone, a faint smile tugged at her lips. The mission had survived. The data was intact. She had survived. And in the quiet moments before the team noticed, she allowed herself a brief reflection. Courage wasn't always loud. Heroism didn't always demand recognition. Sometimes it simply required standing firm, refusing to yield, even when invisible to the world. The team's chatter broke through the dawn as they greeted her. Their relief palpable, their fatigue visible, but their gratitude unspoken. She returned nods and brief words, letting their reactions fill in the gaps the official records never would. Pride swelled quietly, tethered to the knowledge that she had acted when no one else could. Later, as they moved to board the extraction vehicle, she felt a fleeting pang of loneliness. Recognition mattered, if only in small doses. She longed for acknowledgement, not for herself, but for the affirmation that what she did, silently, invisibly, mattered. Yet the moment passed. Survival required focus, not longing. Hours later, back at base, she reviewed the operation once more. Every maneuver, every decision, every risk measured against potential outcomes. She documented internally what no report would capture: the moments she had saved a life, prevented a breach, secured data, held the line while invisible. Those were her records, etched in memory, and more important than any paper or digital log. When the day ended, she sat alone, the hum of computers fading, the weight of adrenaline giving way to exhaustion. Outside, the world moved on. Cars passed. Birds flew. People lived their ordinary lives, unaware of the extraordinary acts that had just occurred behind the walls of the compound. And she felt it again, the quiet satisfaction of someone who had refused to fall. Her father's voice came to her in memory, soft but insistent. Sometimes the only record that matters is the one you carry inside. She let it settle in her chest, warm and unshakable. Invisible, yes. Unrecognized, yes, but steadfast, necessary, and unbroken. Sometimes, she reflected, the world doesn't notice heroes, but the act itself, the refusal to yield, to fail, to fall, is enough. And in that act there is life, there is meaning, there is quiet, unacknowledged triumph. Why did the letter stay in her pocket, folded and unnoticed, when every instinct screamed to read it now? She had touched it only once, the night before the mission, feeling the edges soften under her fingers. It was from her younger sister, words scrawled in messy handwriting, filled with hope and quiet worry. "I know you're brave, but remember to come back. We need you." She had stuffed it away, afraid that opening it would make her vulnerable, distract her, make her human in a place where humanity could be a weakness. Yet now, standing at the threshold of another operation, she felt its weight like a stone against her chest. The team moved in silence through the dense undergrowth, the humid morning air sticky against skin and gear. Every leaf, every twig that snapped underfoot sounded like an alarm. Her breath was controlled, measured, but her mind raced. This mission wasn't about survival alone, it was about redemption. The previous operation had succeeded, yes, but the intel she had retrieved had stirred more than just strategic advantage. Someone had noticed, and now they were testing her. Testing her ability to hold the line when stakes were higher, when recognition would still be absent, when the world expected her to be invisible. She remembered a mistake she had made long ago, early in training. It had been minor, a missed signal, a misstep in communication, but it had almost cost a teammate his life. She still replayed it sometimes, each detail etched into her memory like a scar. The lesson had been brutal but simple: vigilance saves lives. Complacency, no matter how small, kills. She carried that lesson with her like a mantra, silently repeating it as they advanced. The target was a compound deep in contested territory. Intelligence suggested a rogue faction had taken control, and the information they held could destabilize months of careful planning. She had studied the blueprints, rehearsed the infiltration, and mapped every potential exit, every choke point. But maps didn't account for human unpredictability, the fear, the desperation, the mistakes that people made when lives were on the line. A rustle in the trees made her freeze. Her teammates, absorbed in their own scans of the environment, didn't notice. She tilted her head, eyes narrowing, heart racing. Movement to the left, just beyond the shadows. She signaled a halt, hands slicing the air silently. Everyone stopped, confusion and curiosity mirrored in their faces. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. They trusted the unspoken language of shared survival. A figure emerged, male, ragged, holding a rifle loosely at his side. His eyes widened at the sight of them, not hostile but uncertain. Her pulse steadied. This wasn't a trap. Yet caution remained. Every mission had layers she could not see, dangers hidden beneath appearances. She stepped forward, voice soft but firm. "Who are you? What's your purpose here?" He hesitated, scanning the team, assessing them, then lowering his weapon. I mean no harm. I'm trying to protect them," he said, voice quivering slightly. Her eyes met his, reading the fear and resolve in equal measure. He was desperate, yes, but sincere. In that instant, she realized that human complexity was the greatest challenge she would face. Not just enemy fire, not just terrain, not just stealth. People, their fears, and their choices could turn the tide as easily as any bullet. Her mind flicked to her sister's letter again. "We need you." She had understood its meaning then, but now in the field it became a guiding principle. Protection wasn't abstract, it was personal. It was why she refused to fall. Every life depended on someone willing to hold the line when it mattered most. She couldn't be a hero in name alone, she had to act, unseen, relentless, unyielding. The compound loomed ahead, tall and angular, shadows stretching like grasping hands. She signaled the team forward, moving with the practiced stealth of someone who had made invisibility a skill, not just a circumstance. Every step was deliberate, every glance calculated. She felt the weight of responsibility like a second skin, pressing down, but it was familiar. She had worn it before, and she would wear it again. Inside, chaos awaited. The rogue faction had been warned of their approach. Shouts, orders, and the shuffle of boots reverberated through the corridors. Her team split according to plan, and she fell back slightly, eyes scanning, ears tuned to every microsound. A door creak, a whispered command, a distant footstep. Her mind anticipated, calculated, predicted, always one step ahead. A sudden shout from the corridor startled her. She darted forward, sidearm drawn, finding Corporal Reyes pinned by a falling beam. The dust filled the air, stinging her eyes, making her cough. Without hesitation, she pried the beam away, dragging him to safety. His gaze met hers, gratitude and shock intermingled. She nodded briefly, brushing dust from her shoulders. Actions, not words, defined her. Recognition wasn't required. Survival was. They pressed forward, deeper into the compound, each room a new puzzle, each corner a potential threat. The rogue faction wasn't coordinated. They were desperate, untrained, but unpredictable. She used their mistakes, their fear, turning chaos into advantage. Her team followed her lead, trusting the instincts they had learned to recognize but never fully articulate. Hours passed like this, a blur of tension, strategy, and fleeting victories. They found the target, a secured room with encrypted servers and stacks of classified documents. She moved quickly, fingers dancing across the keys, bypassing locks, decoding files. Every second mattered. Outside, footsteps and muffled voices reminded her that time was finite, that danger was always present. Then came the first real casualty. A teammate, private and young, misstepped, setting off a silent alarm. She reacted instantly, covering the hallway, directing others to safety, suppressing panic with the force of will that had defined her career. She felt a pang of guilt, knowing she couldn't prevent every mistake, couldn't shield every life. But she could mitigate, she could survive, she could refuse to fall. That, she realized, was enough. Extraction was tense. The team moved quickly, carrying secured data, retreating through the compound as it descended into chaos. She brought up the rear, watching every angle, sensing threats before they materialized. Each heartbeat was loud, each breath a reminder of fragility and determination. Outside, the dawn had fully broken, casting sharp light across the terrain. Shadows retreated, but danger lingered. They reached the extraction point, breaths ragged, bodies exhausted, hearts heavy. The helicopter descended, blades cutting the morning air with a violent rhythm. She loaded the last of the equipment, sliding in just as the vehicle lifted. Relief washed through her, mingled with exhaustion and quiet pride. Back at base, the debriefing was clinical. Reports, feedback, observations. Her name wasn't mentioned. It never would be. But she carried the knowledge of the mission's success, etched into her memory like a secret victory. She had acted when it mattered most, protected lives, refused to fall. That was enough. That always had been. Late that night, she finally unfolded the letter from her sister. Words she had avoided now felt urgent, alive. "We need you. Please come back." She read them slowly, letting the emotion wash through her, a rare vulnerability. Tears blurred her vision, but she pressed on. Survival was messy. Courage was messy. And sometimes the quiet acknowledgement of love was more important than any official recognition. She placed the letter back in her pocket, standing by the window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. Each light represented a life, a story, a quiet victory or struggle unseen. She realized that her mission, her refusal to fall, was part of a larger tapestry, a thread woven quietly, invisibly, but indispensably. Sometimes, she thought, it wasn't the medals or the recognition that mattered. It was the act itself, the steadfast refusal to yield, the courage to keep moving forward when no one else noticed. That was heroism. That was survival. And in that quiet, unseen dedication, she found a strange, fierce peace. The city slept, unaware of the battles fought in the shadows, of the sacrifices made by those who would never be recorded in the logs. And she, silent, invisible, steadfast, remained vigilant, refusing to fall, protecting the mission, protecting the lives of those who could never repay her. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. Why did the sound of a distant explosion make her stomach twist, even when she knew it wasn't aimed at her team? It was the kind of noise that settled into your bones, the subtle vibration of danger creeping closer, testing nerves, demanding vigilance. She paused on the rooftop, scanning the horizon, eyes narrowed against the glare of midday sun. Smoke curled like dark fingers into the sky from a nearby sector, a reminder that chaos always existed, even when you thought the operation was under control. Her team was regrouping below, checking gear, assessing injuries, confirming intel. They moved with the efficiency of people who had survived too many operations to panic, but their brief glances toward her carried trust and unspoken questions. She had always been the last one in line, the invisible shadow that made sure no one fell. And now, more than ever, that role weighed on her. She remembered the mission briefing. The risks had been outlined, but predictions rarely accounted for the unpredictability of human behavior, the stubbornness of enemies, the hidden mistakes that no training could prevent. Her mind flashed back to earlier in the week, poring over schematics in her quiet apartment, memorizing every doorway, every vent, every possible contingency. She had done her homework meticulously, and yet, even preparation didn't eliminate fear. It only sharpened awareness. A comms alert crackled softly. Private Lawson's voice came over, tight with concern. "Ma'am, we've got an unaccounted movement. Sector 7. Her pulse spiked. Sector 7 was a maze of narrow corridors and hidden stairwells. One wrong step could strand a teammate, leave them exposed, vulnerable. She didn't hesitate. "Keep your head down. I'm on it." She moved swiftly, boots silent against metal grates, eyes scanning for threats. Every sound was amplified, the hum of ventilation, the rustle of loose debris, the subtle shift of fabric against a body. She paused at the corner, breathing steady, mind calculating. It was instinct, honed over countless missions. Reflex, strategy, anticipation. The difference between life and death. She rounded the corner and froze. A squad member, young and nervous, crouched behind a support column, eyes wide. I thought I heard someone," he whispered. Her heart clenched, not from fear, but empathy. Fear was natural, it was human. Controlling it, channeling it, using it, was what separated survival from catastrophe. "Stay calm," she said softly, crouching beside him. Her hand rested briefly on his shoulder, a silent reassurance. "Watch the exit. I'll check the hall." She could feel his tension relax slightly under her gaze. Actions mattered more than words, especially now. She advanced carefully, every movement deliberate. The hallway was empty, deceptively so. Shadows stretched across walls, stretching time, elongating her caution. Then from the corner of her eye a figure moved. Quick, calculated, a trained operative. Not one of her team. Not yet hostile, but testing, probing. She stepped forward, voice low and commanding. "Identify yourself." The figure froze, weapon halfway raised. Eyes narrowed, measuring. Seconds stretched into eternity. Then recognition dawned. "Ma'am, I'm here to assist." Intel breach from earlier, you retrieved the files, right? I'm here to help secure them before extraction. Relief and tension intertwined. She had been right, trouble had followed her success. But allies could shift the tide and she needed every advantage she could find. Then follow my lead, stay sharp, eyes everywhere, no heroics. They moved together, a silent partnership born of necessity, threading through the compound like ghosts. She led the way, signaling with gestures honed by experience, eyes catching the smallest deviations in the environment. The weight of responsibility pressed heavier than any pack or weapon. She wasn't just guarding herself. She was guarding lives, data, and the fragile balance of survival. Hours passed. They secured the additional intel, reinforced defenses, and prepared for extraction. But the true test hadn't come yet. A sudden alarm echoed through the compound, a mechanical shriek that vibrated in their chests. She froze. The breach wasn't accidental. Someone knew. Someone had anticipated their moves. Her team looked to her. Fear flickered, but trust was evident in their eyes. She inhaled slowly, letting the rhythm of her heartbeat steady. Decisions had to be precise, deliberate. Panic was a luxury they couldn't afford. She issued commands calmly, almost softly, but with absolute authority. Move to secondary exit, maintain formation, cover each other. No one gets left behind. The corridors became a gauntlet. Smoke, debris, distant shouts. Each step carried the risk of injury, misstep, or worse. But she moved like a shadow, leading, covering, calculating. Every instinct was alive, sharpened by experience and an unwavering refusal to fall. A teammate tripped on uneven flooring, cursing softly. She was there in an instant, pulling him up, steadying him. "Keep moving," she urged, voice calm. "We're almost out." She could feel the tension in his shoulders release slightly under her guidance. Even small gestures mattered in chaos. Survival depended on connection, vigilance, and unyielding resolve. Finally, they reached the secondary exit. The sun poured through broken windows, illuminating dust and debris. Extraction vehicles waited, rotors slicing air, engines humming with urgency. She signaled her team forward, scanning for threats until the last member was safely aboard. She followed the final figure in the line, eyes flicking constantly, mind calculating the approach, the retreat, contingencies in case of pursuit. As she boarded the vehicle, she allowed herself a brief glance back. The compound, chaotic and dangerous, receded behind her, but the weight of responsibility lingered. She had kept them alive, yes, but the cost, the tension, the ever-present threat of failure pressed against her like a shadow she could never fully shake. Back at base, the debriefing was technical, focused on metrics and efficiency. Her name remained unmentioned. The reports highlighted data retrieved, procedures followed, outcomes achieved. But the invisible work, the instinct, the quick decisions, the risks no one saw remained her secret. And she didn't mind. Recognition was fleeting. The truth of survival was enduring. Later, in solitude, she pulled the letter from her sister again. "We need you. Please come back." The words burned with quiet insistence. She pressed them to her chest, feeling the weight of responsibility, love, and vulnerability converge. She allowed herself a rare moment of reflection, acknowledging the fear she carried, the sacrifices she made, and the strength she summoned from silence. Her thoughts drifted to the team she had just led through danger. Each face, each gesture, each moment of trust was etched into her memory. She realized that heroism wasn't about medals, recognition, or public acknowledgement. It was about action, courage, and the unyielding resolve to protect and survive when no one else could. As night fell, she remained at her station, reviewing every detail, every possible threat, every contingency. The city beyond the base hummed with indifference, unaware of the lives saved, the dangers averted, and the sacrifices made in its shadows. And in that quiet vigilance she found peace. Sometimes, she reflected, heroism wasn't loud. It wasn't written down or praised. It lived in the act itself, in the refusal to fall, in the quiet courage, in the unacknowledged strength. And that, she thought, was enough, always enough. Because in the end, dignity doesn't need an audience. it simply acts. Why did the comms go dead again right when she needed them most? The sudden silence pressed against her ears like a physical weight. The mission had taken a sharp turn, moving from predictable to uncertain, and now, in the dim corridor of the abandoned facility, she felt that familiar mix of anxiety and determination coil in her chest. Every instinct screamed, "Stay alert." One wrong move, one hesitation, could undo everything she had fought to protect. Her team moved cautiously, shadows stretching against cracked walls. Dust swirled in the sunlight streaming through broken windows. She led from the rear, scanning, calculating, absorbing every sound and movement. Every creak of metal, every soft thud, every whisper of air through shattered glass, each was a potential threat. She had learned that in uncertainty, vigilance wasn't optional. It was survival. The facility had been abandoned for years, but it had life now, unseen, unpredictable, dangerous. Her heart tightened as she remembered what had been at stake in earlier missions, the faces of teammates she had shielded, the lives she had held together with quiet decisions and swift reflexes. It was the weight of responsibility that never left her, even when invisible to the world. A sudden noise, a metallic scrape, made her freeze. Her eyes darted toward the corner. A shadow moved. She crouched, drawing her sidearm. Her pulse raced, but she focused, letting her training temper her fear. The figure emerged, hands raised. It was a young insurgent, trembling, unarmed. Panic and desperation painted his features. She lowered her weapon slightly, assessing. "Who sent you? Why are you here?" Her voice was calm but firm, a controlled edge beneath soft authority. I was told to defend this place," he stammered. "I don't want to hurt anyone, I have a family." His words landed like stones, heavy with truth. She recognized the human element that no training could fully prepare you for, the fear, the hope, the choices that weighed more than orders. Her mind flicked back to her sister's letter again. "We need you." It wasn't just words. It was a reminder of why she continued, why she risked herself when recognition never came. It wasn't about medals or records. It was about people. Every life mattered. Every choice counted. She had learned that in silence, in invisibility, the weight of action could tip the balance between survival and loss. She gestured toward the hallway. "Come with me. No sudden moves, you're coming with us." The insurgent hesitated, fear battling instinct, then nodded. Her team watched, tension visible, but they trusted her judgment. Actions mattered more than assumptions, more than appearances. She led them through the facility, every step measured, every glance calculated. They reached a stairwell, descending into lower levels that were darker, tighter, more dangerous. A sudden alarm shrieked, mechanical and piercing. Her pulse spiked. Someone had triggered a security protocol, an unpredictable variable she had to manage instantly. She barked commands, guiding her team with precision. "Cover the exits, stay together, move fast." They advanced, weaving through shadows, the insurgent trailing but compliant. She could feel the tension in the air, thick as smoke, the weight of responsibility pressing on her shoulders like lead. This was no longer just about survival. It was about trust, about managing chaos, about leading people who depended on her instincts more than instructions. In a narrow corridor, they encountered resistance. Another insurgent, armed, stepped from the shadows. Reflexes honed over years kicked in. She engaged, movements precise, controlled, ensuring no one else was harmed. Within seconds, the threat was neutralized. She didn't celebrate. There was no time for that. Only forward, only vigilance, only survival. Her team's movements mirrored hers, trained, efficient, aware, but she could sense their fatigue, their tension. They were humans, after all, not machines. And she, too, carried fatigue in her bones, worry in her chest, memories of past mistakes in her mind. But she had learned to channel those emotions, to turn fear into focus, doubt into determination. That was how she survived. That was how the mission survived. Hours felt like days as they moved deeper, securing critical intel and reinforcing defensive measures. Each door opened, each room cleared, each risk mitigated was a small victory, but vital. She knew the cost of complacency. She knew the price of hesitation. Every decision mattered, even when no one would record it. Finally, they reached the extraction point. The first light of dawn broke through shattered windows, casting long shadows across debris-strewn floors. Her team checked in, confirming all personnel accounted for. Relief mingled with exhaustion, but she didn't relax. Not yet. She scanned the area, instincts alert for any sign of ambush or hidden threats. The insurgent they had captured earlier watched quietly, a mixture of fear and relief on his face. She realized that in moments like these, survival was more than strategy. It was humanity, compassion, a recognition that even enemies carried lives, families, fears. She allowed herself a brief glance at him, silently acknowledging his humanity without lowering her guard. The extraction vehicles arrived, rotors slicing the air, engines vibrating the ground. Her team boarded efficiently, leaving her to cover the rear. She felt the familiar rush of adrenaline, the sharpened awareness, the heightened senses, the need to be precise, deliberate, unbroken. She moved through the corridor, ensuring no one was left behind. Every corner, every shadow, every potential threat passed under her scrutiny. Finally, satisfied, she boarded. The helicopter lifted and the facility disappeared beneath them, a patchwork of danger, chaos, and triumph. Back at base, the debriefing was methodical, clinical. Success metrics, data integrity, operational outcomes, all noted. Her name remained absent from the official reports, but she didn't mind. Recognition was fleeting. Survival, protection, and action were enduring. She had acted, she had protected, she had refused to fall, and that, she reflected, was enough. Alone later, she pulled the letter from her sister out again. "We need you." She pressed it to her lips, feeling its weight. It wasn't just a reminder. It was a guiding principle, a touchstone for why she continued. Courage, she realized, wasn't about being seen. It was about standing firm, acting decisively, protecting when no one noticed. The city beyond the base hummed quietly, indifferent to the battles waged in shadows, the sacrifices made in silence. And she, invisible yet steadfast, remained vigilant. She knew her role, to act when no one else could, to refuse to fall when lives depended on her. Sometimes, she thought, heroism doesn't announce itself. It doesn't wait for applause or recognition. It lives in action, in choice, in courage when the world is unaware. And in that quiet, unacknowledged strength, she found peace. Because dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. Why did the map shake in her hands, as if it too understood the danger looming ahead? Every line, every corridor, every marking she had memorized countless times now seemed alive, shifting, demanding vigilance. The mission had reached a critical point. There was no room for error. Every decision she made now could determine whether her team survived or didn't. The extraction route had been compromised. Reports of enemy movement, previously inconsequential, had intensified into a tangible threat. Her team relied on her. They always did, often without realizing it. Her presence was quiet but essential, a steadying force in the chaos. She inhaled, letting her focus sharpen. Fear wasn't an option, determination was mandatory. Hours earlier, they had secured the final intel. It was vital, sensitive, potentially catastrophic if it fell into the wrong hands. She had guarded it with meticulous care, rerouted communications, and even faced direct confrontation to protect it. The sense of responsibility pressed on her chest like a stone, heavier than any pack or weapon she carried. She was invisible, unrecorded in the logs, yet indispensable. The terrain ahead was treacherous. Rubble, half-collapsed buildings, and narrow alleys that gave advantage to anyone hiding in the shadows. She moved ahead, scanning for threats, ears tuned to the smallest anomalies. The city around them was quiet, eerily so, a deceptive calm that only heightened her tension. Suddenly, a faint click echoed nearby. Her instincts flared. Movement, a single shadow flitting across a wall. She froze, eyes narrowing. She could sense danger before it materialized, a skill honed over years of missions where hesitation had cost lives. She raised her hand, signaling the team to halt. A figure emerged from the shadows, cautious, armed. Her heart beat faster, not from panic but from calculation. This wasn't just an enemy, it was a test, a confrontation she had anticipated yet dreaded. She stepped forward, voice low but commanding. "Identify yourself, now." The figure hesitated, weapon trembling slightly. I'm with command, sent to assist. Data breach from earlier, you retrieved the intel, correct?" Relief and tension collided inside her. Allies, yes, but the uncertainty of loyalty and the ever-present risk of deception made her stay wary. "Follow my lead. No mistakes," she ordered, eyes sharp. Together they navigated the labyrinthine alleys, each step deliberate, each gesture precise. Every corner concealed potential danger. Her team moved behind her, trusting instincts they barely understood. She was the unseen guide, the silent guardian, the force keeping chaos at bay. Hours passed. The extraction point neared, but with it the enemy's presence became undeniable. She could hear distant shouts, the metallic scrape of weapons, and the low hum of mechanical reinforcements. She adjusted the plan, rerouted the team, and positioned herself where she could shield them. She had learned long ago that leadership wasn't about glory. It was about calculation, anticipation, and willingness to be invisible yet indispensable. Then came the first shot, a sharp crack that echoed through the alley, sending adrenaline coursing through her veins. She dropped instinctively, pulling a teammate to cover. Another shot. Her mind worked in fractions of a second, deciding, acting, ensuring no one fell. Every heartbeat mattered. Every decision could save or cost a life. She countered, moving like a shadow, precise, deliberate. Each maneuver was calculated, born from months of experience, instincts sharpened by the refusal to fall. She wasn't seeking heroics. She was ensuring survival, her team's lives dependent on her choices and actions. Amid the chaos, she noticed Private Lawson struggling, cornered by an enemy operative. Reflex took over. She moved faster than thought, intercepting, creating a barrier between him and danger. The enemy fell back, caught off guard. Relief surged briefly, but she didn't pause. There was no time. Extraction vehicles were within sight, blades slicing the air, engines thrumming with urgency. Her team moved efficiently, carrying both equipment and the weight of their collective fear. She stayed at the rear, scanning, calculating, anticipating threats that others couldn't perceive. Her body ached, her mind screamed for respite, but there was no room for weakness. Not now, not ever. A sudden explosion rocked the street ahead. Dust and debris filled the air, choking vision. Her team froze. She assessed instantly. The blast hadn't hit them directly, but it changed the trajectory of danger. Alternate routes had to be calculated. She signaled quickly, pointing, directing, commanding with a quiet authority born from necessity. They moved, dodging falling masonry, weaving through shadows, using every advantage the environment provided. She led with precision, each step deliberate, each decision guided by experience and the refusal to fail. Behind her, her team followed, trust implicit, unspoken but absolute. Finally, they reached the extraction zone. The helicopter descended, blades slicing the morning air. She ensured the last of her team boarded safely, scanning constantly for lingering threats. Only when everyone was accounted for did she allow herself to exhale. Back at base, the debriefing was structured, clinical, detached. Mission metrics, intel integrity, operational outcomes, all noted. Her name remained absent. She didn't care. Recognition was fleeting. Survival, protection, and decisive action were enduring. She had refused to fall. She had ensured others did as well. That was enough. That had always been enough. Alone later, she reflected on the mission's cost. The weight of decisions, the constant vigilance, the sacrifices unseen and unrecorded, it pressed on her like a shadow. And yet, amid exhaustion and quiet reflection, a fierce pride lingered. She had acted when no one else could. She had protected lives, preserved the mission, and navigated chaos with unseen expertise. Her sister's letter, folded and worn, rested in her pocket. "We need you." She pressed it to her chest, letting its weight remind her why she continued, why courage wasn't about recognition but about steadfast action. She had learned that heroism was quiet, invisible, and enduring. And she too was quiet, invisible, enduring. Sometimes, she thought, the world never sees the acts that matter most. But in action, in choice, in courage under pressure, there is heroism, there is life, there is meaning. And in that quiet, unacknowledged strength she found peace. Because dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. Why did the silence feel heavier than the gunfire? The mission had ended, the danger past, yet she felt its presence still, like smoke lingering long after the fire had died. Her boots echoed softly on the concrete as she walked through the empty streets, alone for the first time in days. The team had been accounted for, the intel secured, extraction complete. But the weight of what had been carried, what had been sacrificed, remained. She remembered every step of the operation. The choices that had saved lives, the split-second decisions that could not be undone, the quiet acts of courage that no one would ever document. Recognition had never mattered, and yet in this stillness she felt its absence like a ghost. But she understood something deeper now. Heroism wasn't about applause. It wasn't about medals, rankings, or records. It lived in action, in the refusal to yield, in standing firm when survival depended on it. Her hands rested briefly on the letter from her sister, folded and worn, edges softened from repeated handling. "We need you. Please come back." She had read it countless times, avoided it at others, yet it had been her anchor. In the chaos of missions, it reminded her of why she endured, why she pressed forward, why she refused to fall even when invisible. The debriefing at base had been clinical, detached, focusing on metrics and outcomes. Her name had been absent from every slide, every report, every record. It was the way it always was for her. She didn't need recognition. She needed acknowledgement, quiet, personal, human. And sometimes that acknowledgement came not from reports but from the lives she saved, from the team she led through fire and fear, from the knowledge that she had done what no one else could. She walked to the rooftop of the base, a vantage point overlooking the city bathed in the golden light of late afternoon. The wind tugged gently at her hair, carrying the faint hum of distant traffic, the subtle murmur of life going on as though the world had no idea what had transpired in its shadows. She closed her eyes, letting the breeze wash over her, grounding her, reminding her of fragility and strength intertwined. Her mind drifted back to the first operation that had tested her resolve, the first time she had realized that mistakes were costly, and courage was measured not by visibility but by consequence. She remembered faces, names, fleeting moments of shared fear and triumph. Some had survived, some had not. Every loss had been a lesson, every success a quiet reassurance that she could navigate chaos with precision and heart. A soft comms alert interrupted her reflection. A message from the team, all accounted for, safely back, debriefed. She allowed herself a faint smile. Relief mingled with exhaustion, pride tempered by humility. She had led, protected, acted. The mission survived because she refused to fall. Her name might never be in the records, but the outcome spoke louder than any document. She thought of Private Lawson, wide-eyed and trembling in his first real firefight, and of Corporal Reyes, pinned under debris, breathing sharp and scared. She had lifted them, guided them, shielded them without hesitation. Every gesture had been instinct, every decision precise, every moment of courage unrecorded but vital. And she would do it again, silently, invisibly, without question. Night fell. The city lights flickered on, small points of brilliance against darkness. She remained on the rooftop, gazing out, reflecting on the weight of invisibility. It had never been a burden, it had been a choice. She chose action over applause, life over recognition, duty over ego. That choice had kept people alive, preserved missions, maintained fragile balance in chaos. She unrolled a small notepad she kept tucked in her gear. For herself, not for the world. She wrote a single line. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. She pressed the pen down, letting the words sink into paper and heart alike. They were her record, her truth, her testament. The world might never know, but she did. And sometimes that was enough. A soft sigh escaped her lips. Exhaustion tugged at her limbs, yet a quiet pride lingered, persistent and unshakable. She had faced fear, uncertainty, and death, and she had moved forward, refusing to falter. The mission survived. Her team survived. And she survived, intact, unbroken, resolute. From the rooftop, she watched the world move on. Cars passed, lights blinked, life unfolded oblivious to the battles fought in its shadows. And she, quiet, steadfast, invisible to most, felt a profound sense of fulfillment. She had been present where it mattered most. She had acted when no one else could. That, she realized, was the truest measure of courage. Her gaze softened as she thought of her sister. She would return home eventually, yes, but for now, duty called. The world needed her strength, her vigilance, her refusal to falter, even when unseen, even when unrecorded. And she would answer that call silently, persistently, without hesitation. Finally she stood, letting the night air wrap around her. The city hummed below, unaware, unknowing. She felt the weight of what she carried, the victories, the scars, the quiet triumphs, but she also felt release. The mission was complete. The team was safe. And she remained, resilient and unbowed, the unseen guardian of lives that would never fully know her name. She turned, descending the stairs toward the base, footsteps light but determined. Somewhere in the distance, a street lamp flickered, casting a faint glow that caught her silhouette. It was a small, quiet image of endurance, of courage unseen but present, of a woman who refused to fall even when the world looked away. As she disappeared into the corridors of the base, the world outside continued, oblivious to the acts that mattered most. And she smiled faintly, inwardly, knowing the truth that no record could ever capture. The mission survived because she had refused to fall. Always. Sometimes, she reflected, the world never sees the heroes who matter most. But the act itself, the courage, the vigilance, the steadfast refusal to yield is enough. It lives, it endures, and in that quiet, unacknowledged strength there is profound, unspoken dignity. The night stretched on, silent, unbroken, eternal in its quiet testament. And she, invisible yet indispensable, continued her watch, because refusing to fall wasn't a choice. It was her identity.